The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across the streets of Owyhee, Nevada, as Olivia Parker stumbled backward through the swinging doors of the Gilded Lily Saloon, her body hitting the muddy street with enough force to knock the breath from her lungs. The year was 1876, and in a lawless frontier town like Owyhee, a saloon girl's dignity meant little to men who'd been drinking since noon. "And stay out," bellowed Bart Thornton, the saloon's owner, his fleshy face contorted with rage. "I don't care how many customers like your pretty face, I won't have nobody stealing from the till." Olivia pushed herself up onto her elbows, her emerald green dress now splattered with mud. Her auburn hair, which she'd spent an hour arranging into careful curls, had come loose from its pins. "I didn't take anything, Bart, I swear it," she cried, but the man had already disappeared back inside, the doors swinging shut behind him. The small crowd that had gathered to watch her humiliation began to disperse, most returning to the saloon for another drink, a few casting pitying glances her way before hurrying along. In a town like Owyhee, folks generally minded their own business. Getting involved in other people's troubles was a good way to find some of your own. Olivia's eyes welled with tears as she tried to stand. Her ankle throbbed, she must have twisted it in the fall. 3 years of working at the Gilded Lily, serving drinks to miners and cowboys, enduring pinches and propositions, all for what? To be thrown out like garbage based on the word of Thornton's nephew, who'd been eyeing her paycheck since he arrived from back east. The October air bit through her thin dress and she shivered. Night was falling fast in the high desert, and without her shawl or coat, both still inside the saloon along with everything else she owned in the world, she'd be at risk of freezing before morning. "Excuse me, madam." Olivia looked up to find a tall figure blocking what remained of the sunset. His face was shadowed beneath the wide brim of a dusty Stetson, but she could make out the strong line of his jaw, darkened with several days' worth of stubble. "Seems to me that wasn't a fair shake you got in there," the man said, his voice low and steady. He shrugged off his long duster coat and with a gentlemanly flourish that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance, draped it around her shoulders. The warmth of it engulfed her immediately, along with the sense of leather, horses, and something uniquely masculine. The coat was far too big, the sleeves extending well past her fingertips, but in that moment it felt like the finest silk. "Thank you, but Olivia began, attempting to stand again only to wince as pain shot through her ankle. "Easy there." In one smooth motion, the stranger crouched beside her, offering his arm for support. As she looked at him properly for the first time, Olivia felt her breath catch. He was handsome in a weathered, dangerous sort of way, the kind of man mothers warned their daughters about. His eyes, a startling shade of blue, crinkled slightly at the corners as he studied her injured ankle. "I'm Cole Porter," he said simply. "And you look like you could use a friend right about now." "Olivia Parker," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, "and I don't know that I have any friends left in Owyhee." Cole's gaze shifted to the saloon, his expression hardening momentarily before returning to her. "Well, Miss Parker, you've got at least one now," he gestured to her ankle. "That needs tending. My horse is hitched just down the street. Would you allow me to help you to the doctor's?" Olivia hesitated. She'd learned the hard way that kindness from men often came with expectations. But the alternative was spending the night in the street with nothing but a borrowed coat. "I can't pay the doctor," she admitted, hating the weakness in her voice. "Everything I own is still inside." Cole nodded thoughtfully. "Then we'll see about getting your belongings back. But first, let's take care of that ankle." Without waiting for her response, he carefully helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight as she tested her injured limb. "Why are you helping me?" Olivia asked, unable to keep the suspicion from her tone. "You don't know me." A small smile played at the corner of Cole's mouth. "My ma raised me better than to leave a lady in distress." His expression grew more serious. "Besides, I've been in this territory long enough to recognize when someone's been wronged." As they made their slow way down the street, Olivia wrapped tighter in his coat. She couldn't help but notice how the townspeople gave Cole a wide berth, many nodding respectfully as they passed. It seemed that Cole Porter, whoever he was, commanded a certain respect in Owyhee. "You're not from around here," Cole observed as they approached a handsome chestnut gelding tied outside the general store. "St. Louis," Olivia replied. "Came west 3 years ago after my parents died. The Gilded Lily was the only place hiring." She didn't add that it had been either that or starvation. Cole helped her to lean against a hitching post while he adjusted his saddle. "St. Louis, huh, long way to travel alone. I had dreams of California," she said with a bitter laugh. "Never made it past Owyhee." "Dreams have a way of changing course," Cole replied, his voice carrying a note of experience. With surprising gentleness, he helped her mount the horse before swinging up behind her. The solid warmth of his chest against her back was both unsettling and comforting. "Hold on," he murmured, reaching around her to take the reins. His arms created a secure circle around her as he guided the horse toward the other end of town. As they rode, Olivia became acutely aware of how this must look: a saloon girl pressed against a stranger, wearing his coat, riding through town at dusk. Her reputation, already questionable due to her profession, would be in tatters. Then again, without employment, perhaps it no longer mattered. "Doc Evans' live's just up ahead," Cole told her, his breath warm against her ear. "Best sawbones between here and Carson City." "Mr. Porter, I appreciate your kindness, truly I do," Olivia said, turning slightly to face him, "but I have nothing to offer you in return." Cole's expression remained unreadable in the fading light. "I'm not asking for anything, Miss Parker." "Men always want something," she replied, the words escaping before she could stop them. To her surprise, Cole laughed, a genuine sound that rumbled through his chest. "Can't argue with that logic, but for now all I want is to see you safely to the doctor's. After that, well, we'll figure out the rest." The doctor's house was a modest white building with a small sign in the window. Cole dismounted first, then carefully helped Olivia down, supporting her as they approached the door. Before he could knock, Olivia placed a hand on his arm. "Why did those people look at you that way, back on the street?" Cole hesitated, then removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at his temples. In the lantern light from the doctor's window, she could see him more clearly: the strong lines of his face, a small scar bisecting one eyebrow, and those remarkable blue eyes that seemed to hold more stories than he'd ever tell. "I work for the law, Miss Parker," he finally said. "U.S. Marshal out of Carson City. I'm here on business." Olivia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. A lawman. Of all the people to come to her aid, it had to be a U.S. Marshal, a man who represented everything she'd learned to fear and avoid. "I see," she said stiffly, attempting to step away from him, but her injured ankle betrayed her and she stumbled. Cole caught her easily, his expression concerned but patient. "Whatever you're thinking, Miss Parker, I suggest you set it aside until we've had that ankle looked at." "I'm not here for you." Before she could respond, the door opened to reveal a gray-haired man in suspenders, wiping his hands on a towel. "Marshal Porter," he greeted, his gaze shifting to Olivia with professional interest. "What have we here?" "Evening, Doc. This is Miss Parker. She's had a bit of trouble and injured her ankle. Would you mind taking a look?" The doctor stepped aside, gesturing them in. "Of course, come in. Mrs. Evans just put on a fresh pot of coffee." As Cole helped her inside, Olivia found herself wondering what kind of lawman stopped to help a fallen saloon girl. And more importantly, what would happen once her ankle was tended and she was left alone again in a town that had just cast her out. Dr. Evans's examination room was small but immaculate, with a worn leather examination table and shelves lined with medical texts and glass bottles. The doctor worked efficiently, his fingers gentle as he probed Olivia's swollen ankle. "A sprain, not a break," he announced after a few minutes. "You'll need to stay off it as much as possible for a week or so. I'll wrap it tight and give you some willow bark for the pain." Olivia nodded, though her mind was racing with the impossibility of the situation. Where would she go? How would she survive a week without work? The room at the saloon had come with her employment, and the few dollars she'd managed to save were hidden in her mattress, now as inaccessible as if they were locked in a bank vault. Cole had remained in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space, hat in hand. "Thank you, Doc." "What do we owe you?" Before the doctor could answer, Olivia interjected, "I told you, Marshal, I can't pay." Dr. Evans waved a dismissive hand. "The Marshal's credit is good with me. Consider it settled." Cole nodded his thanks, and Olivia felt a fresh wave of humiliation. First his coat, now his charity. She'd spent years fighting to stand on her own, and in a single evening she'd been reduced to dependence once again. While the doctor bound her ankle with practiced movements, Mrs. Evans appeared with steaming cups of coffee. She was a plump, kind-faced woman who clucked sympathetically at Olivia's mudded dress. "My dear, you look half frozen. Would you like to clean up a bit before you leave? I have a wash basin in the back room." Grateful for the small kindness, Olivia accepted. As Mrs. Evans helped her hobble to the adjoining room, she heard the men's voices drop to a murmur behind her. The washroom was small but private, with a porcelain basin and a cracked mirror on the wall. Mrs. Evans provided a cloth and some soap, then tactfully withdrew. Left alone, Olivia finally allowed the tears she'd been holding back to fall. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, hair tangled, face smudged with dirt, eyes red-rimmed. She'd come west full of hope, a 19-year-old girl with dreams of a new life after losing her parents to influenza. Now, at 22, she was no closer to those dreams than the day she'd stepped off the stagecoach. With trembling hands, she washed her face and attempted to restore some order to her hair. Cole's coat, which she'd removed for the doctor's examination, lay draped over a chair. She ran her fingers over the worn leather, wondering about the man who wore it. A lawman with a kind streak was a dangerous combination, the kind that could lead a woman to believe in things that weren't real. When she emerged, feeling marginally more presentable, she found Cole and Dr. Evans in conversation, which abruptly ceased at her appearance. "Feeling better?" Cole asked, his eyes taking in her improved appearance with approval. "Yes, thank you," she replied formally, extending his coat toward him. "And thank you for the loan of this." Instead of taking it, Cole shook his head. "Keep it for now, night's getting cold." Dr. Evans handed her a small paper packet. "Willow bark tea, steep it good and strong for the pain, and remember, stay off that ankle as much as you can." Olivia tucked the packet into her dress pocket. "I appreciate your help, Doctor, Mrs. Evans." She turned to Cole, squaring her shoulders despite the fear churning in her stomach. "Marshal Porter, you've been very kind, but I won't impose on you further." Cole's expression remained neutral, though she thought she detected a glint of amusement in his eyes. "And where exactly do you plan to go, Miss Parker?" The question hung in the air between them. Olivia had no answer that wouldn't sound pathetic. Mrs. Evans broke the uncomfortable silence. "You're welcome to stay here tonight, dear. We have a spare room." "That's very generous," Olivia began, "but Miss Parker needs to retrieve her belongings from the saloon first," Cole interrupted smoothly. "With your permission, Doc, I'll bring her back afterward, Doctor." Evans nodded his agreement, and before Olivia could protest further, Cole had helped her back outside to his waiting horse. "I don't recall agreeing to go back to the saloon," Olivia said as he lifted her into the saddle. Cole mounted behind her, his arms once again creating that disconcerting cocoon of security. "You said everything you own is still inside. Seems to me getting it back should be a priority. And you think Bart Thornton will just hand it over because you ask?" She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "He threw me out like trash." Cole urged the horse forward, his tone matter of fact. "Thornton will cooperate because I'm not asking, I'm telling. Lawfully employed or not, you have a right to your personal property." As they rode back toward the Gilded Lily, now glowing with lantern light and alive with piano music, Olivia felt a flutter of apprehension. "You don't understand. If you force the issue, he'll make things worse for me once you're gone." Cole's reply was quiet but resolute. "Then we'll make sure I'm not gone until we've sorted this out properly." The saloon was crowded when they arrived, the Friday night revelry in full swing. Heads turned as Cole helped Olivia dismount, more than a few patrons recognizing her despite the oversized coat she still wore. "Wait here," Cole instructed, guiding her to a bench outside the barber shop next door. He removed his badge from his pocket and pinned it to his vest, a small action that transformed him completely. The helpful stranger disappeared, replaced by a man whose authority was unmistakable. "I won't be long," he assured her, and then strode purposefully toward the saloon doors. Olivia watched him go, torn between hope and dread. No one had ever stood up for her like this before, certainly not a man she'd known less than an hour. But experience had taught her that goodwill was often fleeting, and she couldn't afford to depend on Cole Porter's continued interest in her welfare. She waited in the deepening darkness, listening to the muffled sounds from the saloon. Twice, men paused on their way inside, leering at her until they noticed the marshal's coat she wore, at which point they hurried on. The minutes stretched painfully, her imagination conjuring increasingly dire scenarios of confrontation inside. Just as she was considering hobbling away to spare herself whatever public humiliation might be coming, the saloon doors swung open. Cole emerged, carrying her carpet bag in one hand and her shawl in the other. Behind him, framed in the doorway, stood Bart Thornton, his face an alarming shade of purple. "Marshal," Thornton called out, his voice carrying down the street, "you remember what I said, that girl is trouble." Cole turned slowly, fixing the saloon owner with a stare that made the larger man step back. "And you remember what I said, Thornton, this matter is closed." He tipped his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Enjoy your evening." Returning to Olivia, Cole handed her the carpet bag with a small smile. "Everything should be there. I supervised the packing myself." Olivia clutched the bag to her chest, overwhelmed by relief. "I don't know how to thank you." "You can thank me by telling me what really happened in there," Cole replied, helping her to her feet. "But not here. Let's get you back to the doctor's first." The ride to Dr. Evans's house was quick and silent. Olivia's mind raced, weighing how much to tell this man who had inexplicably become her champion. By the time they arrived, she'd made her decision the truth, or at least most of it. Mrs. Evans welcomed them warmly, showing Olivia to a small but clean bedroom at the back of the house. After helping her settle and providing a nightgown and robe, the older woman withdrew, leaving Olivia alone with her thoughts. She changed quickly, wincing as she navigated around her injured ankle. The nightgown was modest but clearly well worn, probably belonging to the Evanses' daughter or perhaps a grandchild. Olivia had just finished brushing out her hair when a soft knock sounded at the door. Cole stood in the hallway, still wearing his hat and gun belt. "Doc says you should drink your tea before sleeping," he said, offering her a steaming cup. Mrs. Evans added honey. Olivia accepted it gratefully. "You didn't have to bring this yourself. I wanted to check on you before I left." He hesitated, then added, "And to hear your side of what happened today." Olivia gestured to the room's single chair. "You might as well sit then, it's not a complicated story." Cole removed his hat but remained standing. "I'll stand, thank you, wouldn't be proper otherwise." The formality surprised her, not what she expected from a man who spent his days chasing outlaws. She sipped the bitter tea, gathering her thoughts. "I've worked at the Gilded Lily for 3 years," she began. "It's not what I planned when I came west, but it was honest work. I served drinks, smiled at customers, danced occasionally." She met his eyes directly. "I was not one of the girls who went upstairs with men, though Bart pressured me often enough." Cole's expression remained neutral, but she sensed his careful attention. 2 weeks ago, Bart's nephew arrived from Philadelphia. Chester Thornton, full of Eastern ideas and looking to make changes to the business. He took over the bookkeeping, among other things. Olivia's hands tightened around her cup. He made advances. When I refused him, he started watching me, looking for any excuse. Today he claimed money was missing from the till during my shift. "Was there money missing?" Cole asked, his tone free of accusation. "No," Olivia said firmly. "Or if there was, Chester took it himself." But Bart believes his nephew over any saloon girl, especially one who's been rejecting his own propositions for 3 years. Cole nodded slowly. "That fits with what I heard inside. Thornton changed his story twice when I questioned him." A small smile touched his lips. Your belongings were returned with surprising speed once I mentioned that theft accusations without evidence could warrant a more thorough investigation of his business practices. Relief washed through Olivia. "So you believe me?" "I do," Cole said simply. "Though it doesn't much matter what I believe. Without witnesses or evidence, it's your word against theirs." The reality of her situation crashed back over Olivia. "So I'm still without a job, a home, or prospects in a town where Thornton has just labeled me a thief." Cole studied her for a long moment. "You could leave Owyhee and go where? With what money?" She gestured to her carpet bag. "Everything I own is in there, and it's not much." "I have a proposition for you, Miss Parker," Cole said carefully. Olivia stiffened, her guard instantly rising. Here it was the price for his help. Noting her reaction, Cole held up a hand. "Not that kind of proposition. I'm here investigating a series of stagecoach robberies. The latest was 3 days ago, just outside town. The bandits took a strongbox containing army payroll." Confused by this turn in the conversation, Olivia waited for him to continue. "I've been watching the Gilded Lily because I have reason to believe the men responsible frequent the place. I need someone who knows the regular customers who might notice strangers or unusual behavior." Understanding dawned. "You want me to be your informant. I want to hire you officially as a consultant to the U.S. Marshal's office," Cole corrected. "It pays $3 a day plus expenses. You'd report only to me, and when the case is resolved, you'd have enough money to go wherever you choose, California included." Olivia's mind raced. It was an unexpected lifeline, but also potentially dangerous. If these men are robbing stagecoaches and stealing army payroll, they wouldn't hesitate to hurt someone they suspected of informing on them. Cole acknowledged this with a nod. "There's risk, I won't deny it, but you'd have the full protection of my office and we'd be discreet." He paused, then added more gently, "I'm not asking you to decide tonight. Think on it. The offer stands either way." Olivia studied him, searching for any sign of deception or hidden motives. His gaze remained steady, those blue eyes clear and direct. "Why me?" she finally asked. "You could hire anyone in town. Because you've been watching people for 3 years, learning to read them, to anticipate their needs and moods. That's valuable." He smiled slightly. "And because you've got nowhere else to go, which means you're motivated to succeed." His honesty was refreshing, if a bit brutal. "I'll think about it," Olivia conceded. Cole nodded, satisfied. "I'm staying at the Silver Spur Hotel, room 204. When you've decided, you know where to find me." He placed his hat back on his head and moved toward the door. "Get some rest, Miss Parker." "Doctor's orders." "Marshal," Olivia called as he reached the threshold. He turned back, eyebrow raised in question. "Thank you for everything tonight." Cole touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. "Sleep well, Miss Parker." After he'd gone, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, the half-empty teacup cooling in her hands. The willow bark was beginning to dull the pain in her ankle, but her mind remained sharp, turning over Cole Porter's unexpected offer. She'd come west seeking adventure and opportunity, only to find herself trapped in a dead-end existence. Now, a door had suddenly opened, risky, uncertain, but a door nonetheless. And behind it stood a man unlike any she'd encountered before, a lawman with honor and, unless she was gravely mistaken, integrity. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window panes. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, its lonely cry echoing across the desert night. Olivia drew Cole's coat closer around her shoulders, breathing in its comforting scent, and made her decision. Morning arrived with the golden clarity that made the Nevada desert both beautiful and unforgiving. Olivia woke early, having slept better than expected in the Evanses' spare room. Her ankle throbbed dully as she dressed in her cleanest dress, a modest blue calico that had seen better days, but was presentable enough. Mrs. Evans had already prepared breakfast when Olivia made her way to the kitchen, moving slowly with the help of a walking stick the doctor had provided. "Good morning, dear," the older woman greeted her cheerfully. "The doctor's already out on a call, but he left instructions for you to continue resting that ankle. How does it feel today?" "Better, thank you," Olivia replied, accepting a cup of coffee. "Mrs. Evans, I can't thank you enough for your hospitality, but I should be moving on today. The woman's kind face creased with concern. But where will you go? The doctor said you need at least a week of rest. Olivia sipped her coffee, considering how much to share. I may have found temporary employment with Marshal Porter. Mrs. Evans's eyebrows rose significantly. I see. Her tone suggested she saw rather more than Olivia had intended. It's not he's offered me a position as a consultant, Olivia clarified quickly, for a case he's working on. Understanding dawned in the older woman's eyes. The stagecoach robberies, yes, that makes sense. She patted Olivia's hand. The Marshal is a good man, known him for years since he first started riding this territory. If he's offered you work, you can trust his word. The endorsement eased some of Olivia's lingering doubts. I hope to speak with him this morning. Would you know where I might find him at this hour? Mrs. Evans smiled. Most likely at Jenny's cafe having breakfast. The man's routine is as reliable as sunrise. After finishing her own breakfast and thanking the Evans family profusely for their kindness, Olivia made her slow way toward the center of town. Owyhee was already bustling with morning activity, shopkeepers sweeping their storefronts, freight wagons rumbling down the main street, miners and cowboys going about their business. She felt eyes on her as she passed. News traveled fast in small towns, and her unceremonious dismissal from the Gilded Lily would be common knowledge by now. Holding her head high despite the whispers, Olivia continued toward Jenny's cafe, a modest establishment known for its fresh bread and strong coffee. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. The cafe was crowded with the breakfast crowd, the air fragrant with the smells of bacon and coffee. Olivia spotted Cole immediately, seated alone at a corner table, a newspaper spread before him and a half-eaten plate of eggs at his elbow. He looked up at her entrance, a flicker of surprise crossing his features before he folded the newspaper and stood. Miss Parker, he greeted her, pulling out a chair. Join me, Olivia seated herself, aware of the curious glances from other patrons. I've considered your offer, Marshal Porter. Cole signaled to the waitress, who promptly brought a fresh cup of coffee for Olivia. And I accept, she said simply, though I have questions about the arrangement. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. I'd be concerned if you didn't. He pushed his plate aside, giving her his full attention. Ask away. Olivia leaned forward, keeping her voice low. How would this work? I can't exactly return to the Gilded Lily after yesterday. No, Cole agreed, but you could frequent other establishments, the Silver Dollar, Harper's Tavern. Places where the same men might drink. You'd observe, make conversation where appropriate, and report anything suspicious to me. And where would I stay? The Evans family has been kind, but I can't impose on them indefinitely. Cole took a sip of his coffee before answering. There's a boarding house on Maple Street run by a widow named Mrs. Holloway. Respectable place, reasonable rates. I've already spoken with her about a room for you. Olivia blinked in surprise. You seem very confident I would accept your offer. Not confident, Cole corrected. Hopeful. The investigation has stalled and I need fresh eyes. He studied her for a moment. Besides, you strike me as a woman who prefers action to indecision. There was something in the way he said it, not as a criticism, but as an observation, perhaps even with approval that made warmth rise to Olivia's cheeks. When do I start? She asked, steering the conversation back to safer ground. Today, if you're feeling up to it. Cole reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. Your first week's pay in advance for the boarding house and any other necessities. Olivia hesitated before accepting it. I haven't earned this yet. Consider it an investment, Cole replied. I'll escort you to Mrs. Holloway's after breakfast, help you get settled. The waitress returned, and Cole ordered fresh eggs and biscuits for Olivia, despite her protest that coffee would be sufficient. As they waited for the food, he provided more details about the investigation: 4 stagecoach robberies in the past 2 months, always along the same stretch of road, always targeting shipments that weren't publicly announced. Someone has inside information, Cole concluded. And they're spending money freely in Owyhee. New clothes, expensive drinks, generous tips. That's what I need you to watch for men with unexplained prosperity. Olivia nodded, already mentally cataloging the regulars from the Gilded Lily who might fit such a description. What about Chester Thornton? Could he be involved? Cole considered this. Possible, though unlikely. He arrived after the robberies began. Still, don't rule anyone out. Their conversation continued through breakfast, shifting from the case to more general topics. Cole, she learned, had been a U.S. Marshal for 5 years after serving in the Army during the latter part of the Civil War. He was originally from Colorado, the son of a silver miner who died in a cave-in when Cole was 16. My mother returned east afterward, he explained. I stayed, worked the mines for a few years until I'd had enough of darkness. Joined the Army at 18, discovered I had a talent for tracking. The Marshal's office recruited me after my discharge. And you never married? Olivia asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. Forgive me, that's none of my business. Cole didn't seem offended. No need for forgiveness, and no, never married. This job doesn't lend itself to settling down, he smiled slightly. My mother writes regularly to remind me of this fact. There was something comfortable about their conversation, a natural rhythm that surprised Olivia. For a man who chased dangerous criminals for a living, Cole Porter was remarkably easy to talk to, direct without being brusque, attentive without being intrusive. By the time they left the cafe, Olivia felt more optimistic than she had in months. The job might be temporary and potentially dangerous, but it offered independence and purpose, two things she'd been sorely lacking. Mrs. Holloway's boarding house proved to be a tidy 2-story building with a small front garden. The widow herself was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who looked Olivia up and down with shrewd assessment before nodding her approval. Marshal Porter vouches for you, and that's good enough for me, she declared. Rules are simple: no gentlemen callers in private rooms, no alcohol on the premises, and quiet hours after 9 in the evening. Breakfast is included, other meals are extra. Laundry day is Monday. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small writing desk beneath the window. After the cramped quarters above the saloon, it felt almost luxurious. It's perfect, Olivia told Mrs. Holloway. Thank you for accommodating me on such short notice. The older woman's expression softened slightly. Been in your shoes once, dear. Sometimes all a woman needs is a safe place to catch her breath. With that cryptic comment, she excused herself to attend to other duties. Left alone with Cole, Olivia felt a sudden awkwardness descend. He stood just inside the doorway, hat in hand, his tall frame making the small room seem even smaller. Will this do? He asked, gesturing to the accommodations. More than adequately, Olivia assured him. I can't thank you enough for arranging it. Cole nodded, seemingly satisfied. I'll leave you to settle in. Rest that ankle today. Tomorrow evening, if you're feeling up to it, we can start at the Silver Dollar. I'll come by around 7 to escort you. As he turned to leave, Olivia impulsively reached for his arm. Your coat, I still have it. It's at the doctor's house. A small smile touched Cole's lips. Keep it for now. Nights are getting colder. He hesitated, then added more softly, it suits you. Before she could respond, he'd placed his hat on his head and was gone, boots echoing down the hallway. Olivia sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted by the morning's events. 24 hours ago, she'd been serving whiskey at the Gilded Lily, trapped in a life with no visible escape. Now, she was employed by a U.S. Marshal, living in a respectable boarding house and wearing a coat that suited her, according to the most intriguing man she'd met in years. Life, it seemed, could change direction as swiftly and unexpectedly as a desert dust storm. The next evening arrived with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Olivia had spent the day resting her ankle as instructed and preparing for her new role. She'd washed her hair, mended the torn hem of her green dress, the most presentable one she owned, and practiced observing Mrs. Holloway's other boarders during the communal dinner, noting details about their appearance and conversation that might otherwise have escaped attention. At precisely 7 o'clock, a knock sounded at her door. Cole stood in the hallway, dressed much as he had been the previous day, though his shirt looked freshly laundered and he'd trimmed his stubble to a neat shadow along his jaw. "Evening, Miss Parker," he greeted her. "How's the ankle?" "Much improved," Olivia replied, pulling his coat around her shoulders. She'd retrieved it from the doctor's house earlier, along with a jar of salve for her injury. "I'm ready whenever you are." Cole offered his arm for support as they descended the stairs. Mrs. Holloway watched their departure with thinly veiled curiosity from her sitting room doorway. "Remember, Miss Parker, doors locked at 10 sharp," the widow called after them. "Yes, Mrs. Holloway," Olivia responded dutifully. To Cole, she murmured, "I feel like I'm 16 again, with a guardian monitoring my comings and goings." Cole's mouth quirked in amusement. "Mrs. Holloway runs a tight ship, but she's fair, and her boarding house has the best reputation in town." Outside, the evening air carried the first real bite of autumn. Stars were already appearing in the darkening sky, and lanterns glowed in shop windows along the main street. Cole had left his horse at the livery stable, explaining that the silver dollar was just a short walk away. As they strolled, he briefed her further on their strategy. "We'll present ourselves as acquaintances, nothing more. I've been seen around town enough that my presence won't raise suspicions, but we shouldn't appear to be working together." Olivia nodded her understanding. "How should I explain my sudden appearance at a new saloon?" "The truth, more or less," Cole replied. "You left the Gilded Lily after a disagreement with management. Keep it vague, people will fill in their own details." The Silver Dollar Saloon was smaller than the Gilded Lily but similarly appointed, with a long mahogany bar, gaming tables, and a small stage where a piano player was half-heartedly plunking out a popular tune. The crowd was respectable for a weeknight, miners still dusty from their shifts, a few cowboys, and several well-dressed men Olivia recognized as local businessmen. Cole led her to a table near the bar, positioned so they could observe most of the room. "I'll get us drinks," he said, loud enough to be heard by nearby patrons. "Whiskey?" Olivia shook her head. "Sarsaparilla, please." While Cole approached the bar, Olivia surveyed the room with practiced casualness. 3 men at a corner table caught her attention immediately. They were better dressed than most of the patrons, playing cards with stacks of coins and bills before them. One wore a gold watch chain that glinted in the lamplight. Another sported a new-looking leather vest with silver conchos. Cole returned with their drinks, sliding onto the chair across from her. "See anything interesting?" he asked quietly. 3 men at the back table," Olivia murmured, taking a sip of her sarsaparilla. "The one with the red neckerchief is Mitch Harlow. Regular at the Gilded Lily, usually can't afford more than 2 drinks a night. Now he's playing high-stakes poker with what looks like a month's wages." Cole's eyes flicked briefly to the table in question. "Good observation. What about the others? Don't recognize them." "Not regulars at the Lily, at least not during my shifts." Olivia studied the men more carefully, but they're comfortable with Harlow, old acquaintances, not new ones. For the next hour, they maintained their casual facade while Olivia pointed out various patrons, providing background information and noting any recent changes in behavior or spending habits. Twice, men she knew from the Gilded Lily approached their table, surprised to see her in a different establishment. Each time, she smoothly explained her departure from her previous employment without mentioning Cole's involvement. As the evening progressed, the saloon grew more crowded and boisterous. The piano player was replaced by a small band, and a few couples began dancing in the cleared area before the stage. Olivia found herself enjoying the familiar atmosphere without the pressure of serving drinks or fending off unwanted advances. "Dance with me," Cole said suddenly, interrupting her observations. Olivia blinked in surprise. "What? Harlow's watching us," Cole explained quietly. "Has been for the last 10 minutes. A dance would give us a better view of the room and his table." It was a logical suggestion, yet Olivia felt a flutter of nervousness as Cole stood and extended his hand. She hadn't danced with a man truly danced, not the perfunctory movements expected of saloon girls since leaving St. Louis. "My ankle," she began. We'll go slow, Cole promised. The band was playing a languid waltz and the dance floor wasn't overly crowded. Cole led her to a spot that afforded a clear view of Harlow's table while keeping them partly concealed by other dancers. His hand settled at her waist, warm and secure, while the other clasped hers gently. The height difference between them was significant. The top of Olivia's head barely reached Cole's shoulder, but he adjusted his steps to accommodate both this and her injured ankle. "Keep watching Harlow," Cole murmured, his breath stirring the hair near her temple. "But smile as if I've said something amusing." Olivia complied, tilting her face up to his with a practiced laugh. Their eyes met briefly, and something in Cole's gaze, a warmth that had nothing to do with their charade, made her laugh falter. "You're good at this," he observed, guiding her through a gentle turn. "Dancing or pretending?" Olivia asked, recovering her composure. "Both, it seems." There was genuine curiosity in his tone. "Where did you learn to dance like this, not at the Gilded Lily?" "My parents were music teachers in St. Louis," Olivia explained, her attention still partly on Harlow's table. "Dancing was considered an essential part of a proper education," Cole nodded thoughtfully. "And yet you ended up serving whiskey in Owyhee." There was no judgment in his voice, only interest, which emboldened Olivia to share more than she typically would. "After my parents died, our home and belongings were sold to pay debts I hadn't known existed. I had a choice between marrying a man my father's age or making my own way." She met his gaze directly. "I chose the latter." Something like respect flickered in Cole's eyes. "A brave choice." "Or a foolish one," Olivia countered, her tone light despite the seriousness of the subject. "The jury's still out on that question." Cole's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Not from where I'm standing." The simple statement, delivered without embellishment or flattery, affected Olivia more deeply than any flowery compliment could have. Before she could respond, however, movement at Harlow's table caught her attention. "They're leaving," she murmured, nodding subtly toward the men. Cole maneuvered their dance position to better observe. Indeed, Harlow and his companions were collecting their winnings, preparing to depart. As they stood, one of the men, a broad-shouldered fellow with a scar running along his jawline, stumbled slightly, his coat falling open to reveal a glimpse of what appeared to be a shoulder holster. "Did you see that?" Olivia whispered. "The holster," Cole nodded almost imperceptibly. "Unusual for a casual night out." They continued dancing until the three men had left the saloon, then returned to their table. Cole leaned forward, his expression serious but his voice casual for any who might overhear. "Good work," he said. "Harlow's been on my list of potential suspects, but I hadn't connected him to the other two." "Do you know who they are?" Olivia asked, sipping her now warm sarsaparilla. "The one with the scar is Jake Delaney, ex-cavalry, dishonorable discharge. The other is probably his brother, Thomas. They've been in and out of Owyhee for about 3 months." Cole's eyes narrowed slightly. "Right around when the robberies started." Olivia considered this. "Harlow works as a stable hand at the stage depot when he's sober enough. He would know the schedule, maybe even which coaches carried valuable cargo." Cole nodded, impressed by her reasoning. "Exactly what I was thinking." He glanced toward the clock behind the bar. "It's getting late. I should get you back to Mrs. Holloway's before she locks the doors." As they walked back through the now quiet streets, Olivia found herself reviewing the evening's events. The investigation provided a convenient framework for their interactions, but she couldn't ignore the undercurrent of something more personal developing between them. The way Cole had looked at her during their dance, the respect in his voice when she'd mentioned her decision to leave St. Louis, these weren't the actions of a lawman merely using an informant. "You're quiet," Cole observed as they approached the boarding house. Olivia smiled slightly. "Just thinking about the case. Any new insights?" "Not about the case, no." She hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I was actually wondering about you, Marshal Porter. You're not what I expected." They'd reached the steps of the boarding house and Cole paused, turning to face her in the pool of light cast by the porch lantern. "What did you expect? Someone harder, less?" Olivia searched for the right word. Less considerate, a small smile played at the corner of Cole's mouth. Disappointing to find I'm not the cold-hearted lawman of dime novels. Not disappointing, Olivia corrected softly. Surprising. They stood in silence for a moment, the night air cool around them, the sounds of the town fading to a distant murmur. Cole's expression was thoughtful, his eyes searching hers as if trying to read something written there. Finally, he spoke. "Good night, Miss Parker. I'll check in with you tomorrow." "Good night, Marshal," Olivia replied, suddenly reluctant to end their evening. As she watched him walk away, his tall figure gradually swallowed by the darkness, Olivia acknowledged a truth she'd been avoiding. Her interest in Cole Porter had become personal, not just professional. And that was dangerous territory indeed for a woman in her position. The following days established a rhythm to their investigation. During daylight hours, Cole pursued his official inquiries, interviewing stagecoach drivers, reviewing manifests, tracking the movements of his suspects. Evenings were spent with Olivia, sometimes at the Silver Dollar, sometimes at Harper's Tavern, gathering information and observations. Their partnership proved surprisingly effective. Olivia's years at the Gilded Lily had given her an intimate knowledge of the town's social dynamics, while Cole contributed his investigative experience and authority. Together, they built a stronger case against Mitch Harlow and the Delaney brothers, confirming their associations and tracking their suspicious spending. But as their professional collaboration deepened, so too did their personal connection. Small moments accumulated. Cole bringing Olivia a book she'd mentioned wanting to read. Olivia noticing and commenting on the way he always aligned his coffee cup handle to the right, shared laughter over a drummer's outlandish tales at the Silver Dollar. Each interaction revealed more of the person behind the professional facade. By the end of the first week, Olivia's ankle had healed enough that she could walk without the cane, though she still wore Cole's coat whenever they ventured out in the evening. She'd offered to return it several times, but he always declined with that small smile that was becoming increasingly familiar. "Consider it on indefinite loan," he'd said the last time she'd tried to give it back. "At least until the case is resolved." The case, however, was progressing slowly. Despite their mounting suspicions about Harlow and the Delaneys, they lacked concrete evidence linking the men to the robberies. No stolen goods had been recovered, no witnesses had come forward to identify the masked bandits, and the next scheduled gold shipment was still days away. It was during this period of relative frustration that Cole suggested a change in strategy. "We need to draw them out," he explained one evening as they sat in the back corner of Harper's Tavern. "Make them think there's an opportunity they can't pass up." Olivia frowned. "A trap." "Isn't that dangerous? All police work involves some risk," Cole acknowledged. "But I'm not suggesting anything dramatic, just a rumor carefully placed about a special shipment coming through." "And how would this rumor be placed?" Olivia asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Cole met her gaze steadily. "Through you. Harlow knows you worked at the depot. If you mentioned overhearing something casually, it might be enough." Olivia considered this. The plan made tactical sense, but it would put her in a more active role than before. "When?" "Tomorrow night." "Harlow usually drinks at the Silver Dollar on Fridays." Cole leaned forward, his expression serious. "If you're not comfortable with this, say so. There are other approaches we can try." His consideration touched her. Most men would have simply issued instructions, expecting compliance. "I'll do it," Olivia decided, "but I want you nearby when I approach him." Relief flickered across Cole's features. "Of course, we'll work out the details beforehand, make sure you're protected." As they continued discussing the plan, Olivia found herself studying Cole's face, the small lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his brow furrowed slightly when he was thinking deeply, the rare but rewarding full smile that transformed his normally serious expression. She'd come to anticipate their evenings together, to value not just his protection but his company. It was dangerous territory for her heart, especially knowing that once the case was solved, Cole would move on to his next assignment, likely in another town. Yet she couldn't seem to guard against the growing affection she felt for him. Later that night, as they walked back to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, their conversation turned to more personal matters. "Have you thought about what you'll do after this case is closed?" Cole asked. "Will you continue west to California as you'd planned?" The question had been on Olivia's mind as well. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "California was a girl's dream. I'm not that girl anymore." Cole nodded thoughtfully. "Dreams change. That doesn't make them less worth pursuing." "What about you?" Olivia countered. "Have your dreams changed since you became a marshal?" Cole was quiet for a moment, his pace slowing. "When I first pinned on the badge, all I wanted was to make a difference, to bring some order to the chaos." He smiled slightly. "Simple ambitions for a complicated job." "And now," he hesitated, then shrugged. "Let's just say I've started thinking there might be more to life than chasing outlaws across the territory." There was something in his tone that made Olivia glance up at him sharply, but his expression remained unreadable in the darkness. They reached the boarding house steps, the familiar end point of their evenings together. Typically, this was where they would part with polite good nights, but tonight Cole seemed reluctant to leave. "Olivia," he said softly, using her given name for the first time. "Tomorrow's plan, I wouldn't ask this of you if I saw another way." The concern in his voice warmed her. "I know, I trust your judgment, Cole." The use of his first name felt intimate, a small breach in the professional boundary they'd maintained. He seemed to feel it too, his gaze intensifying. "Be careful tomorrow," he said, his voice low. "Harlow may seem harmless enough, but he's running with dangerous company." "I will," Olivia promised. "Besides, I'll have you watching over me." Cole's hand moved as if he might touch her face, then fell back to his side. "Good night, then." "Good night," Olivia replied, suddenly breathless. As she watched him walk away, a now familiar ritual, Olivia acknowledged that whatever happened with the case, her heart was no longer entirely her own. Somewhere between the moment, Cole had draped his coat around her shoulders. And now, she had developed feelings for the marshal that went far beyond professional respect or gratitude. Whether those feelings were reciprocated, and what either of them could do about it if they were remained questions for another day. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, starting with a dangerous game of baiting potential stagecoach robbers. Friday evening arrived with a tension that had been absent from their previous outings. Olivia dressed with particular care, selecting a burgundy dress that was modest enough for Mrs. Holloway's approval, but attractive enough to draw attention at the Silver Dollar. She arranged her hair in a simple but flattering style, leaving a few auburn curls to frame her face. Cole arrived promptly at 7, his expression betraying nothing of the evening's true purpose to any who might be watching. But as they walked toward the saloon, his demeanor was more guarded than usual, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "Remember," he said quietly, "keep it casual. Mention the special shipment as if it's something you overheard, nothing more. Then excuse yourself and move away." "I'll be watching from the bar." Olivia nodded, her stomach tight with nervous anticipation. "What if he doesn't believe me?" "He will," Cole assured her. "Men like Harlow are always looking for the next opportunity, just don't oversell it." The Silver Dollar was crowded as expected for a Friday night. Cole escorted Olivia to a table, ordered drinks as usual, then made his way to the bar, positioning himself with a clear view of both Olivia and Mitch Harlow, who was already deep in his cups at a corner table. Olivia sipped her sarsaparilla slowly, taking her time, allowing Harlow to notice her presence. It didn't take long. After about 20 minutes, she felt eyes on her and glanced up to find Harlow watching her with undisguised interest. She offered a small, polite smile, then returned her attention to her drink. The bait was set. Now she needed to wait for him to approach. Another 15 minutes passed before Harlow made his move, weaving slightly as he crossed the room toward her table. "Miss Parker, ain't it?" He slurred, bracing himself against the back of the empty chair across from her. "Ain't seen you at the Lily lately." Olivia forced a pleasant expression. "Good evening, Mr. Harlow. No, I'm no longer employed there." Harlow's bloodshot eyes widened in exaggerated surprise. "No, what happened?" "All Bart finally try something he shouldn't." "Nothing so dramatic," Olivia replied smoothly. Just a disagreement about business practices. I've moved on." Harlow nodded sympathetically, though his gaze had dropped to the neckline of her dress. "Shame that. You was always nice to me at the Lily." "Not like some of them other girls." "You're very kind to say so," Olivia said, maintaining her composed facade despite her disgust. "How is work at the stage depot, still mucking out stables?" The question was calculated a reminder that she knew his legitimate employment, and a subtle dig at his current prosperity. Harlow straightened slightly, defensive. "For now, got me some other prospects in the works." He leaned forward conspiratorially. "Man's gotta look out for opportunities in this world, ain't that right?" This was the opening Olivia had been waiting for. "Speaking of opportunities," she said, lowering her voice, "I happened to overhear something interesting the other day. About a special shipment coming through on Monday's stage." Harlow's bloodshot eyes sharpened with sudden interest. "What kind of special?" Olivia glanced around theatrically as if checking for eavesdroppers. "The kind that comes in a strongbox with an army escort." She leaned closer. "Apparently there's been so many robberies lately that they're trying to be clever, sending the real payroll on the regular stage instead of the special courier they usually use." Harlow's face remained carefully neutral, but his fingers tightened on the chair back. "That's so. Ain't much that gets past old Mitch, but I hadn't heard about no special arrangements." "Well, it's not exactly public knowledge," Olivia said with a small shrug. "I only know because I was behind the general store when the depot master was discussing it with the sheriff. They're keeping it quiet, hoping to catch whoever's been robbing the stages." This last part was a calculated risk, suggesting a trap while simultaneously dangling the bait. If Harlow and his associates were indeed the robbers, they might see this as valuable inside information, a way to avoid the supposed trap while still getting the payroll. Harlow scratched his stubbled chin thoughtfully. "Interestin', very interestin'." He straightened, his demeanor shifting subtly. "Obliged for the conversation, Miss Parker. You take care now." "You as well, Mr. Harlow," Olivia replied pleasantly, as if they'd discussed nothing more significant than the weather. She watched as Harlow made his way back to his table, immediately engaging in intense conversation with a companion who joined him during their exchange, a man Olivia recognized as Thomas Delaney. Cole appeared at her side moments later, sliding into the chair Harlow had gripped. "Well done," he murmured. "He's already passing it along to Delaney." Relief washed through Olivia. "He seemed interested. Do you think they'll take the bait?" "Hard to say for certain, but I'd wager yes." Cole's eyes remained on Harlow's table. "We've planted the seed. Now we wait to see if it bears fruit." They maintained their usual routine for another hour, not wanting to leave too soon after Olivia's conversation with Harlow. When they finally departed, Olivia felt the tension she'd been carrying begin to dissipate. "What happens now?" she asked as they walked back toward the boarding house. "Now I arrange for extra security on Monday's stage, discreetly, of course. If Harlow and the Delaneys take the bait, we'll be ready for them." Cole glanced down at her, his expression softening. "You did well tonight, Olivia." Not everyone could have managed that so convincingly. The praise warmed her more than it should have. It wasn't so different from serving drinks at the Lily. You learn to tell people what they want to hear. Cole shook his head. "It's more than that. You've got a natural talent for this work, observing people, gaining their confidence, putting together the pieces." They walked in companionable silence for a while, the night air cool but not unpleasant. Olivia found herself wishing the boarding house was further away, reluctant for their time together to end. "What will you do after we catch them?" she asked suddenly. "Will you return to Carson City?" Cole's pace slowed slightly. "Eventually. There's always paperwork after an arrest, testimonies to prepare." He hesitated, then added, "But I'm not in any hurry to leave Owyhee." The statement hung between them, heavy with implication. Olivia's heart quickened, but she kept her tone casual. "No. I thought marshals were always moving on to the next case." "Usually," Cole agreed, "but sometimes." He trailed off, then stopped walking altogether, turning to face her. Olivia, whatever he'd been about to say was interrupted by the sound of rapid hoofbeats approaching from behind them. Cole instinctively moved Olivia to the side of the street, his hand dropping to his gun as a rider galloped past, heading toward the north end of town. "That was Jake Delaney," Cole said, his expression darkening. "Riding mighty fast for this time of night." Olivia frowned. "Do you think it's related to what I told Harlow?" "Could be," Cole admitted, "or could be unrelated entirely." He sighed, the moment between them broken. "Either way, we should get you safely back to Mrs. Holloway's." The rest of their walk passed in thoughtful silence, the interrupted conversation hovering unspoken between them. At the boarding house steps, Cole tipped his hat as usual, but his eyes lingered on hers. "Get some rest," he said. "I'll come by tomorrow evening to update you on any developments." Olivia nodded, suddenly shy. "Good night, Cole." As she watched him walk away, Olivia couldn't help wondering what he'd been about to say before Delaney's interruption. Had he been on the verge of expressing feelings similar to her own? Or was she projecting her wishes onto a man who saw her as nothing more than a useful assistant in his investigation? Sleep came fitfully that night, her mind too full of both professional concerns about their trap and personal questions about Cole Porter's intentions. By morning, she'd resolved to focus on the former and let the latter sort itself out in time, assuming, of course, that time was something they would have together after the case concluded. The weekend passed with agonizing slowness. Cole visited briefly on Saturday evening to report that all arrangements were in place for Monday's stage, but he seemed distracted, his usual warmth tempered by professional focus. Sunday brought no visit at all, only a brief note delivered by a deputy explaining that Cole was finalizing preparations and would see her after everything was resolved. By Monday morning, Olivia found herself too restless to remain in her room. The stage from Carson City was due to arrive at noon, which meant any attempted robbery would likely occur in the late morning at the most isolated stretch of road between the two towns. Unable to concentrate on reading or sewing, Olivia decided to visit the general store, if only to pass the time. Mrs. Holloway had requested a few items for the boarding house, providing a convenient excuse for the outing. Main Street was busy with the usual Monday morning activities, deliveries being made to businesses, housewives shopping for the week's necessities, children running errands for parents. Everything appeared normal, yet Olivia couldn't shake the feeling of impending drama. At the general store, she took her time selecting Mrs. Holloway's items, eavesdropping discreetly on conversations around her. No one mentioned the stagecoach or any unusual activity, which she took as a positive sign. If an ambush was planned, it hadn't happened yet. She was just completing her purchase when the store's door burst open, admitting a breathless young boy of about 12. They caught him. He announced to the store at large. The stage robbers, Marshal Porter got him red handed out on the Carson Road. The store erupted in excited chatter. Olivia's heart leaped, both with relief that the plan had worked and concern for Cole's safety. Was anyone hurt? She asked the boy, trying to keep her voice steady. The child shook his head. "Nah, Marshal winged one of 'em, but Doc says he'll live to hang." His eyes gleamed with the ghoulish excitement of youth. "They're bringing him in now, whole town's gatherin' to watch." Sure enough, a crowd was forming outside, people abandoning their morning activities to witness the arrival of the captured bandits. Olivia paid for her purchases quickly and joined them, positioning herself near the sheriff's office where the prisoners would presumably be taken. She didn't have to wait long. Within 20 minutes, a small procession appeared at the far end of the street, Cole on horseback, leading 3 mounted men whose hands were bound to their saddle horns. Behind them rode 2 deputies, rifles at the ready. A cheer went up from the assembled townspeople as the group approached. Olivia strained to see past the crowd, her eyes fixed on Cole. He appeared uninjured, his posture straight and authoritative as he guided his horse through the throng. The prisoners were a sorry sight. Mitch Harlow's head hung low, blood seeping through the sleeve of his shirt where a bullet had apparently grazed him. The Delaney brothers maintained a defiant bearing, but their expressions were grim as they faced the jeering crowd. As the group reached the sheriff's office, Cole dismounted and began directing the unloading of the prisoners. It was only then that he noticed Olivia standing among the onlookers. Their eyes met briefly, and a small smile touched his lips before he returned his attention to his duties. The crowd lingered, hungry for details, as the prisoners were led inside. Snippets of conversation swirled around Olivia's speculation about the robbery attempt, praise for the marshal's cleverness, questions about how the trap had been set. No one connected Olivia to the events, a fact for which she was deeply grateful. Eventually, the excitement began to wane, and people drifted back to their regular activities. Olivia, however, remained near the sheriff's office, uncertain whether to stay or go. Her role in the investigation was technically complete, yet she couldn't bring herself to leave without speaking to Cole. Her decision was made for her when the office door opened and Cole emerged, looking tired but satisfied. His eyes scanned the diminished crowd until they found her, and his expression softened into a genuine smile. "Miss Parker," he greeted her as he approached, his tone formal for any who might be listening. "Would you walk with me? I have some matters to discuss." Olivia nodded, falling into step beside him as they moved away from the curious onlookers toward the quieter residential area of town. "They confessed," Cole said once they were out of earshot, "all three of them. Apparently, your conversation with Harlow convinced them this was their last chance at a big score before the army changed its shipping practices." Relief washed through Olivia. "So it's over." "The case is, yes." Cole's expression grew more serious. "They'll be transported to Carson City tomorrow for trial. Given the evidence and their confessions, conviction is certain." "And your role in Owyhee?" Olivia asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. Cole stopped walking, turning to face her. They had reached a small park at the edge of town, empty at this hour except for a few birds pecking at the ground. "That depends," he said carefully. "On what? On you in part." Cole removed his hat, a gesture Olivia had come to recognize as his way of transitioning from professional to personal conversation. "Olivia, before I say anything else, I want to thank you properly for your help. Without your observations and your conversation with Harlow, this case might have remained unsolved for months." "I was happy to help," Olivia replied, though her heart was racing at the intensity of his gaze. "I've arranged for a reward to be paid to you," Cole continued. $500 from the Army for information leading to the recovery of their property. It should be enough for you to go anywhere you choose, California, back east, wherever you want." The sum was staggering more money than Olivia had ever possessed at one time. It represented freedom, options, the ability to start fresh without compromising. "That's very generous," she managed, trying to process the implications. Cole nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "You've earned it. The question is, what will you do with it?" The real question hung unspoken between them, the one Olivia had been avoiding since their interrupted conversation days earlier. Would she stay, or would she go? "I don't know," she admitted. "I haven't thought that far ahead." Cole took a step closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. "I'd like to make a suggestion, if I may." Olivia nodded, not trusting her voice. "Stay in Owyhee," Cole said simply, "at least for a while longer." "Why?" Olivia asked, needing to hear his reasons despite the hope already building in her chest. Cole's expression softened, vulnerability replacing his usual composed demeanor. "Because in the past 2 weeks, I've come to care for you in a way I didn't expect. Because when I think about riding out of Owyhee without knowing if I'll see you again, it feels like leaving something important unfinished." He hesitated, then added more softly, "And because I hope you might feel something similar." The confession, delivered with the same straightforward honesty Cole brought to everything, left Olivia momentarily speechless. She'd imagined this moment, hoped for it even, but now that it had arrived, she found herself uncertain how to respond. "Cole, she began, then paused, gathering her thoughts. "What you're suggesting, it isn't simple. You're a U.S. Marshal. Your life is on the road, moving from case to case. And she gestured helplessly, a former saloon girl with a questionable reputation in a town where that matters." "I'm not asking for simple," Cole replied. "I'm asking for a chance to see where this might lead." He reached out slowly, taking her hand in his. As for my work, there are ways to arrange a more permanent posting, and your past is just that past. Anyone who can't see the remarkable woman you are isn't worth considering. His words and the gentle pressure of his hand around hers dissolved the last of Olivia's hesitation. She'd spent years guarding her heart, expecting the worst from men. But Cole Porter had proven himself different in every way that mattered. "I'll stay," she said softly, "at least for a while longer." The smile that spread across Cole's face was like sunrise breaking over the desert, transformative and full of promise. Still holding her hand, he drew her gently closer. "In that case, Miss Parker, would it be too forward of me to ask permission to call on you properly? No investigations, no pretenses, just a man calling on a woman he admires greatly." Olivia couldn't help but smile at the formal request. "I believe Mrs. Holloway allows callers in the front parlor between the hours of 1 and 5, Marshal Porter." "I'll keep that in mind," Cole murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. The moment stretched between them, laden with possibility. Then, with a gentleness that belied his strength, Cole raised her hand to his lips, placing a kiss on her knuckles that was both chaste and full of promise. "Until tomorrow, then," he said, releasing her hand reluctantly. "Until tomorrow," Olivia agreed, her skin still tingling from his touch. As Cole walked her back to the boarding house, their conversation turned to lighter topics: the town's reaction to the arrests, Mrs. Holloway's likely response to Cole's formal visits, plans for the coming days. Yet beneath the casual exchange ran a current of excitement, of possibilities opening before them like wildflowers after desert rain. The weeks that followed were a revelation for Olivia. Cole called on her daily, their courtship conducted with a propriety that slowly but surely rehabilitated her standing in Owyhee's social hierarchy. They attended church together on Sundays, took walks through town in the afternoons, and occasionally rode into the surrounding countryside for picnics chaperoned by Mrs. Holloway's niece. Cole had indeed arranged for a more permanent posting, accepting a position overseeing law enforcement in the eastern Nevada territory that allowed him to make Owyhee his base of operations. He still traveled for cases, but never for more than a few days at a time, always returning to where Olivia waited. For her part, Olivia used a portion of her reward money to invest in a small millinery shop that had come up for sale, discovering an unexpected talent for business. Her hats became popular among the town's more fashionable ladies, and even those who had once whispered about her saloon days now greeted her warmly on the street. By the time autumn gave way to winter, their courtship had progressed to a point where the entire town expected an announcement. Cole, however, seemed in no rush, content to let their relationship develop at its own pace. It was on a crisp December evening, with snow dusting the streets of Owyhee and Christmas less than a week away, that Cole finally suggested they take a sleigh ride out to see the frozen pond beyond town. Mrs. Holloway, satisfied with the couple's propriety over the preceding months, allowed the excursion without a chaperone, though she extracted a promise they would return before dark. The sleigh was a simple one-horse affair borrowed from a friend, but Cole had lined it with blankets and heated bricks to ward off the winter chill. As they glided over the snow, Olivia nestled against his side, wrapped in the familiar leather coat he'd draped around her on their very first meeting. "Happy?" Cole asked, his breath visible in the cold air. Olivia smiled up at him. "Happier than I ever expected to be in Owyhee. Funny how life works out," Cole mused, guiding the horse around a bend in the trail. "If Thornton hadn't thrown you out that night, if I hadn't been passing by. If you hadn't covered me with your coat and your name," Olivia finished softly. Cole glanced down at her, surprise evident in his expression. "My name, in a manner of speaking," Olivia explained. "That night when everyone was staring, you gave me your coat and introduced yourself, gave me the protection of your identity when I had nothing. It meant something, even then." Cole's arm tightened around her. "I just did what any decent man would do." "No," Olivia shook her head. "Most men would have walked past. You stopped." They had reached the pond, its surface a perfect mirror reflecting the pink-tinged clouds of the winter sunset. Cole brought the sleigh to a halt, securing the reins before turning to face Olivia fully. "I've been carrying something with me for weeks now," he said, his expression suddenly serious, waiting for the right moment. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I think this might be it." Olivia's breath caught as Cole opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring, a small diamond flanked by 2 sapphires on a gold band. "Olivia Parker," Cole said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "I know we've only known each other a few months, but in that time, you've become essential to me in ways I never imagined possible. You're brave, intelligent, and stronger than anyone I've ever met." He took her gloved hand in his. "I'm asking you to make what we have official, to become my wife, my partner in all things. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming joy of having found, against all odds, a man who saw her completely and loved her anyway. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Cole Porter, I will marry you." His smile was brilliant as he removed the ring from its box and slipped it onto her finger, visible even over her glove. Then, finally, he kissed her a kiss that had been building since that first night, gentle yet passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. When they eventually broke apart, both breathless and laughing, the sky had darkened to deep purple, stars appearing one by one above them. "We should head back," Cole said reluctantly. "I promised Mrs. Holloway we'd return before dark." Olivia nodded, but couldn't resist stretching up for one more kiss before they turned the sleigh homeward. As they drove back toward town, the lights of Owyhee appearing like earthbound stars in the distance, she marveled at how completely her life had transformed in the span of just a few months. From a saloon girl thrown into the street to the future wife of a respected U.S. Marshal. From a woman with no prospects to a business owner with a place in the community, from alone to beloved. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked, noting her contemplative silence. Olivia smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "That sometimes, the detours on the road to our dreams turn out to be the journey we were meant to take all along." Cole's arm tightened around her as the sleigh carried them toward home, not the California of Olivia's girlhood dreams, but Owyhee, Nevada, where she had found something far more precious. A love as vast and enduring as the desert itself. They were married on New Year's Day, 1877, in the small white church at the edge of town. Dr. and Mrs. Evans stood as witnesses, along with the sheriff and several of Cole's fellow lawmen. Even Mrs. Holloway shed a tear or two as the couple exchanged vows. After a brief honeymoon in Carson City, they returned to Owyhee to begin their life together in a comfortable house on the outskirts of town, close enough for Olivia to walk to her shop each day, yet private enough for a marshal and his bride. The years that followed brought challenges, as all marriages face, but also immeasurable joy. Cole's reputation as a fair and effective lawman grew, while Olivia's business flourished, eventually expanding to include a dress shop alongside her millinery. Their first child, a son they named Christopher, arrived in the autumn of 1878, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Emma. As their family grew, so too did their roots in the community that had once gossiped about the saloon girl and the marshal. And if, on cool evenings, Olivia occasionally wore a certain weathered leather coat while sitting on their porch watching the desert sunset, Cole never mentioned it. He simply smiled, remembering the night when fate had placed him on a particular street at a particular moment, leading him to cover a fallen woman with his coat, and, unwittingly, with his name, an act of simple kindness that had changed both their lives forever.